Hey guys, Mosa here, and today I'm bringing you my Week 17 NFL Power Rankings. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Now, let's kick it off with the Chicago Bears, dead last, 4-11, eliminated from playoff contention after their loss to the, even before that, I believe, to their loss to the Detroit Lions, 34-17. They'll be taking on my Seattle Seahawks on Thursday night, and hopefully for every Seattle fan winning when it comes to the Seahawks, because honestly, we need to win out, so hopefully we lose. Besides that, I'll talk more on that when we get to Seattle. When it comes to the Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams is their guy, but he needs to develop a little bit more, and honestly, this is a team that could go a lot further than just a playoff appearance, maybe a few wins in the postseason in future NFL seasons, obviously, not this one. So they're going to be preparing for the future. They need to have a good draft. They need to do good in the offseason, signing good free agents, maybe an offensive lineman or so, some defenders, and bam, you got a team that could potentially make the playoffs, let alone win a playoff game. So I'm thinking that the Bears are going to do a lot better in the offseason than the regular season. Up next, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars at 3-12. They just took an L from the Raiders and will take on the Tennessee Titans this upcoming Sunday. Now, when it comes to the Jaguars, obviously eliminated from playoff contention, but if they get a top draft pick, even second or third overall, highly doubt they would, but still, if they do, it's not for a quarterback. They already got their quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. The question is Travis Hunter the next guy off the board? Definite number one overall pick. If it's a quarterback needy team, it's Shedeur Sanders. Otherwise, we're seeing Travis Hunter get off the board immediately. And I think Jacksonville could be a good spot. So if the Jaguars are able to get Travis Hunter on the team as a corner, and then you build up your team through not only the drafts, but also through the offseason, just like the Bears, this team could be a whole lot better. We might be seeing those 2017, I believe, the 2017 Jaguars that went to the AFC Championship game. We might see one of them come back into this upcoming season and having one of those seasons. But for right now, the Jaguars are just looking forward to the 2025 offseason. Now, moving on to the Tennessee Titans at 3-12. They just took an L from the Indianapolis Colts and will take on the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville on Sunday. Now, when it comes to the Tennessee Titans, they don't need a new quarterback if they can develop Will Levis. But if someone like, let's say, Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers is available, you should draft him. Leave your current starter, Will Levis, as the starter, and then let your new guy, whether it be Beck or Ewers, whoever it is, let him ride the bench. Let him learn. He's not like Jaden Daniels, where you could just put him in and he explodes. I believe you need to work with patience with some of these quarterbacks, and I think those two, if drafted to the Tennessee Titans, are definitely that kind of quarterback where you just need a little patience and hope for the future that he, when it comes to his sophomore year in the NFL, he explodes as the starter. Now, moving on to the current worst team in the National Football League, even though he's not the worst team in my power rankings, it is the New York Giants at 2-13. They just took an L from the Falcons, who was led by none other than rookie quarterback Michael Penix Jr., and they'll be taking on the Indianapolis Colts this upcoming Sunday. Now, the Giants are picking a quarterback. Definitely. No matter what, it is going to be a quarterback. Now, whether that be Shedeur or someone else, that depends on whether they have the first overall pick or not. I believe they will get the number one overall pick. If not them, then it's going to be the Raiders. In either case, they're going to pick a quarterback, and it's most likely going to be Shedeur, or if Shedeur's already off the board, they're going to pick the next best quarterback rather than obviously the best player in the draft, which would be Travis Hunter. Now, in my opinion, the Giants need a quarterback, but they also need a line to protect them. So either work in the later rounds to get some offensive linemen and some during the offseason and some defenders as well, so that the Giants can build up a team for their future quarterback. Now, moving on to the New Orleans Saints at 5-10, they just took a massive L to the Green Bay Packers, and they'll take on the Las Vegas Raiders this upcoming Sunday at home. Now, when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, they're broken. They need everything. Everyone's injured. Everyone's gone. They need a full rebuild in New Orleans. And honestly, Derek Carr's not the future of the team. Definitely not. So I'm suggesting that the New Orleans Saints either draft a new quarterback or develop Spencer Rattler. Now, it's much cheaper, obviously, to simply develop Rattler, as he's not a bad quarterback. He's just not in the good situation. I think if he was in a better situation, he'd do better. But literally any quarterback, you put Tom Brady on the 2017-2016 Cleveland Browns, he ain't winning a single game either. Like, that's how bad of a situation this guy's in. Imagine that. The GOAT on a horrible team, it doesn't mean nothing. And honestly, Spencer Rattler's in the same with the Saints when it comes down to it. I'm not saying he's a GOAT like Tom Brady, but any quarterback, no matter how good or how bad, will struggle in a bad team, and that's Spencer Rattler's situation. So they need a new quarterback, or they need a new team to protect their current quarterback. Now, moving on to the New England Patriots, and we got the Patriots at 3-12. They just took an L, a very close L, by the way, to the Buffalo Bills, and will take on the Los Angeles Chargers this Saturday. Now, when it comes down to it, I think the New England Patriots are on the right track with their head coach, at least. I think that Drake May is on the right track. They just need to really construct their offense and defense this offseason, both in the draft and in the free agency market. They've got to put everything around them. They got to get everything ready for Drake May's second season, and potentially he'll do a lot better. But for right now, I'm thinking that the New England Patriots will continue most likely losing, or at least winning one more game. Now, moving on to the Carolina Panthers at 4-11. They just took a win from the Arizona Cardinals and will take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this Sunday in Tampa. Now, when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, obviously eliminated from playoff contention as well, but there's something different about these Panthers than the beginning of the year Panthers. Obviously, you had Bryce Young just terrible at the start of the year. Now he's doing pretty good. And honestly, I'm seeing a good future for the Carolina Panthers if they construct their offense properly, and the same goes for their defense. Honestly, it's how you build your team and how these players will react or interact with their teammates and how they will perform on the field. All of that matters. And honestly, I'm seeing all of this of the Carolina Panthers as them building a new team for the 2025 season. So they need to work hard in the offseason in order to potentially have a chance at the NFC South, let alone the playoffs. Now, moving on to the Cleveland Browns at 3-12. They just took an L from the Cincinnati Bengals and will take on the Miami Dolphins this Sunday. Now, when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, obviously eliminated from playoff contention, they've got to deal with Deshaun Watson next year. Obviously, he got injured this year, and that kind of saved the Browns. Kind of. But yeah, it's not really a good quarterback situation. So even if they build their team up to help Deshaun Watson, honestly, at this point, if I was the owner, Jimmy Haslam, I would, in fact, 100% simply just cut the guy and take my losses, because honestly, it's not worth the baggage of Deshaun Watson, because he's not only has apparently a bad character, because still, until those trials are over, it's not really, you can't really say he did certain things, which I'm not going to mention. But honestly, whether you believe it or not, he has a bad character. But that's not all. He has a bad football ability now. Like, yes, he was a good quarterback back in Houston, but that's not who he is now. You guys got the short end of the stick, and Houston won that trade no matter what you say. Cleveland is done as long as Deshaun Watson is their quarterback. Now, moving on to the New York Jets at 4-11, they took an L from the Los Angeles Rams and will take on the rival Buffalo Bills this Sunday. Now, when it comes to the New York Jets, sorry, Aaron, but you failed as the de facto general manager. You got your coach fired. Didn't help your team at all. You got rid of your general manager. Didn't help the team at all. You got rid of one of your receivers, potentially. Didn't work at all. He actually has a better career now in Pittsburgh than he has ever had in New York. And then you have your best buddy coming in to your team, and still, even though he does good, the Jets aren't winning. And the Jets are eliminated from playoff contention as well. Sorry, Aaron, but unless you're looking to be a mentor next year, the Jets are definitely going to be looking for a quarterback, because there's no way they should keep Aaron Rodgers as the full-on starter for the future, not only due to his age, but due to how badly he has, quote-unquote, run the team, because obviously he's not the general manager or the owner, but apparently he might be. Now, moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders at 3-12. They just took a win from the Jacksonville Jaguars and are ruining their tank, and they will be taking on the New Orleans Saints this upcoming Sunday. Now, the Raiders are definitely ruining their tank with basically going on to win. I get it. Players want to win, and honestly, if I was in their situation, at least as a player, honestly, I'd want to win, disregarding that. But in the end, you need a top draft pick to pick your quarterback. So, yeah, ruining your tank by winning is not the best option right now. Otherwise, honestly, we're not going to be seeing a good team coming from the Las Vegas Raiders anytime soon. And honestly, the Raiders definitely need to work this offseason very hard, because honestly, they have to face off against, guess who? The Kansas City Chiefs, the Denver Broncos, and the Los Angeles Chargers, who are all playoff-bound potential, because obviously the Chiefs are in, and both the Broncos and Chargers are potentially going to go in. Facing off against those teams is not going to be easy. Now on to the San Francisco 49ers at 6-9. They just took an L from the Dolphins and will be taking on the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football. Now, when it comes down to the 49ers, honestly, I do not expect much from them in this game. They're going to most likely lose to Detroit. They're eliminated from playoff contention. I think it was this week after their loss to the Dolphins that they were officially eliminated. Both that and the fact that the Rams and Seahawks, well, technically the Seahawks didn't win, but the Rams did, and the Seahawks are already most likely have a chance to get into the playoffs. But still, besides the point. 49ers are out. They won't repeat as NFC West champions, let alone NFC champions, and will not have a chance to go on for a Super Bowl this season. They'll have to honestly work next season. Their injuries were a big problem, like Christian McCaffrey, obviously Deebo Samuels at times, Ricky Pearsall. Everyone was basically injured at times. Like, I think that they need to not rebuild, but retool the team. I think that would be the best case scenario. And honestly, the 49ers need to do it quick if they want to have a chance back at the playoffs. Now, moving on to the Arizona Cardinals at 7-8. And they just took an L from the Panthers and will take on the Los Angeles Rams on Saturday Night Football. Now, when it comes to the LA Rams, that game's going to be 100% determined for one team, and hopefully for me, it is the Arizona Cardinals. And most likely, it won't be. It will be the Los Angeles Rams winning that game. But besides the point, they lost to the Panthers. And after their loss, and obviously the Rams won and all that, they were eliminated from playoff contention. There is now no chance for the Cardinals or 49ers to make it in as either division champion or as a wild card. They have been eliminated. And honestly, when it comes to Arizona, I think that they need to do a lot better in the offseason, because yes, you got a decent quarterback in Kyler Murray. You got a okay wide receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. You got a good running back in James Conner when he's healthy. But yeah, I think that they're going to need to a little bit of retuning that defense because I think the defense is really what's been troubling the most, at least, for the Arizona Cardinals, and it's the reason why they've been losing games. Yes, the offense has had a hand in it, but I think the defense has been the worst of the Arizona Cardinals this year. Now, moving on to the Indianapolis Colts at 7-8, they took a win from the Tennessee Titans and will take on the New York Giants this Sunday. Now, when it comes down to the Indianapolis Colts, I honestly believe that the Indianapolis Colts will, in fact, have an opportunity to enter the playoffs, but they would have to win the rest of their games and go 9-8. Is that possible? Perhaps. Definitely against the New York Giants, but maybe not at the end of the year. We will definitely see that. But I think that the Indianapolis Colts are on the right track, but obviously not for a playoff run this year, but at least for future seasons. I think that even though they've had issues with their quarterback, I think that they still have a good enough offense and they could potentially make it better in the offseason and in the draft. And the same goes for their defense. They can make it better as well. But for right now, I'm thinking that 100% the Indianapolis Colts are not only looking for a division title in 2025, they're looking for a playoff run because that's what's going to happen because I think that they will actually improve this offseason. Now, moving on to the Atlanta Falcons, who are 8-7. They just took a win from the New York Giants and will take on the Washington Commanders on Sunday night. Now, when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons, honestly, I'm going to tell you this honestly. They're facing a tough team. They're still battling for that division run. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are not letting up, even though they both have the same record. It's still going to be a tough battle. 8-7 for both teams. It could go either ways. But Washington might actually give Tampa a big chance to come back in this division. But most likely week 18, that division, the NFC South, will be decided. And the Falcons will continue their run to try and get that division title and playoff appearance. Now, moving on to the Dallas Cowboys at 7-8. They just taken down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they will take on the Philadelphia Eagles this upcoming Sunday. That Philly game is going to be tough, but it doesn't matter for Dallas. They were eliminated before Sunday Night Football this week. So, yeah, there's absolutely nothing for the Cowboys to play for. They're done, and their season's over. But we all know how the Cowboys are going to do. They're going to just try and win anyways. They're going to ruin their tank to get someone good in the draft. I don't know, some offensive linemen to protect Dak or some defenders to help out on defense, specifically in the linebacking core. I think the pass rush and D-line, they're pretty good. But yeah, the Dallas Cowboys are most likely going to ruin their own tank anyways. And instead of losing their last two games, they're going to at least win one of them, potentially. It really all comes down to if they can. But for right now, you never know what could happen. And honestly, the Cowboys, sometimes they make you think one thing and they do another. Now, moving on to the Miami Dolphins at 7-8. They took a win from the 49ers and will take on the Cleveland Browns this upcoming Sunday. Now, the Dolphins, if I'm not mistaken, are still in the light. They still have a chance to win and get into the playoffs, although that is very slim. And honestly, I don't think they're going to get in. The Dolphins, they have been plagued with too many injuries and too many situations. Honestly, if they had a better season at the beginning of the year, I'd honestly say the Dolphins are in. But too bad for them. They would need to win their last two games, and at least one of them they might lose. And that's honestly what I think will happen. Either one loss or both of them are losses. And to be honest, the Dolphins, they better pack up and get ready because you're going to be out of the playoffs soon. Or at least out of the playoff race. Now, moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals at 7-8. They just took a win from the Cleveland Browns and will take on the Denver Broncos this upcoming Saturday. Now, when it comes to the Bengals, Obviously, they are yet to be eliminated from the playoffs, but honestly, are they going to make the playoffs? I don't think so. I think that their run is basically over at this point, and they're just basically being like good sports. Oh, we're still in it, but eventually they'll be eliminated and they'll just bow out. Honestly, I think that the Bengals will do a lot better job next year, depending on how they build their team around Joe Burrow again, and potentially give him new weapons because he's probably going to lose some more weapons like he did last year. Maybe not T. Higgins or Jefferson. Oh, no, not Jefferson. Jamar Chase. In the end, it all comes down to how you build your team this offseason because you're not making the playoffs. Now, moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 8-7. They just took an L from the Cowboys on Sunday night and will take on the Panthers this upcoming Sunday. Now, obviously, it's a way better game for the Buccaneers than it is for the Falcons this week. And honestly, they're both still in the playoff run and potentially, well, basically not in the playoff run, at least in the wild card. That's over. But the team that wins the division obviously makes it, so that's the reason why they're still in it. They are both 8-7. It'll most likely come to week 18 where whoever wins most likely gets in, and that will most likely be Tampa because obviously they would have the win here and potentially the loss of the Falcons against the Commanders. It all comes down to how good that the Buccaneers can play their last two games, and the same goes for the Falcons. But if I'm not mistaken, if both the Falcons games and the Bucs games are wins, or at least I think they're actually facing each other. No, they don't. In the end, if their last two games are both wins, I think Tampa actually gets the tiebreaker and makes the playoffs ahead of the Falcons. Now, moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, and they're 8-7. They took an L from the Minnesota Vikings and will take on the Chicago Bears on Thursday night. Now, when it comes to the Vikings game, I am not angry. I am not mad. I am simply disappointed because not only did Seattle have to win that game, they have to win against Chicago, which is most likely going to happen. Then they have to go ahead and hope that the Cardinals beat the LA Rams so that we can be then tied record-wise so that then we could beat the Rams on Week 18 and then make the playoffs. Because that's the only route Seattle has. It's if they lose this game against Chicago, it's over, and immediately the Los Angeles Rams are the NFC West champions. There's absolutely no way. And if they win against the Cardinals and we lose, it's over. It's over. Seattle's eliminated potentially as well. Because I don't think if they lose one game, it's over both division and playoff-wise. Because there's absolutely no way these Hawks are making it in if they lose a single game remaining. Now on to the Denver Broncos at 9-6. They took an L from the Chargers and will be taking on the Bengals this upcoming Saturday. Now when it comes to the Broncos, I honestly expect for the Broncos to make the playoffs. Same goes for the Chargers. In the end, it all really comes down to how well they can play the rest of the year. They win their next two games and they're in. That's what I believe. And then they will probably have a chance to win a playoff game. And if not, they be either knocked out in the first round or in the second, one of the two. But the Broncos are not getting to the AFC Championship game. Not one bit. I don't believe it, and I don't think it will ever happen. At least this season. Now, moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers at 9-6. They took a win from the Broncos and will take on the New England Patriots this Saturday. Now, when it comes to the LA Chargers, I'm going to be honest, another playoff team. Just like Denver, they'll make it in most likely 2 wins. And it really comes down to how good they can play throughout these 2 games. They got the Patriots. I don't remember who they face in Week 18, but still, they win both games and they're in. Honestly, 9 wins for both teams can make them get in. Something like that can happen. And honestly, I'm seeing some good futures for both the Broncos and the Chargers. And honestly, just despair for the Las Vegas Raiders and potentially a just demolishing of the Chiefs in future seasons, because after after this season they might actually go so low in the totem pole that they will be the 49ers of next year. Now, moving on to the Los Angeles Rams, who are 9-6, took down the Jets and will take on the Cardinals on Saturday night. Now, when it comes to the Rams, they need a win and a Seattle loss to make the playoffs as the NFC West champions. And honestly, it's not far from it. Like, obviously, if both teams, the Seahawks and the Rams, win, then Week 18 matchup between the Rams and Seahawks will decide the division. And basically, whoever wins, or if it's a tie between them, then if it's a tie and both teams won this week, it's LA who gets in. Otherwise, Seattle really needs to get their heads together, while the Rams, for all Seahawk fans, hopefully they lose against the Cardinals, but honestly, I'm not really expecting a loss by the Rams against the Cardinals. Now, kicking off the top 10, we got the AFC South champion Houston Texans at 9-6. They took an L from the Chiefs and will take on the Ravens on Christmas Day. Now, when it comes down to the Houston Texans, honestly, I expect them to flip-flop between winning and losing throughout these weeks. And honestly, they're still in the playoffs, but they're going to be the worst division team in the playoffs. Like, obviously, either the Steelers and Ravens, both are better than them. When it comes to that was the North. The West, that's the Chiefs, and the Bills are the East. Those teams are all better than the Texans by a mile. Maybe Houston has a chance against Baltimore and Pittsburgh, but other than that, honestly, I'm not really expecting much coming from the Houston Texans, at least in the playoffs, because I think that they might be knocked out in the first round or the second. Now, moving on to number 9, which is the Washington Commanders at 10-5. They just took a win over the Eagles, a very good one, and will take on the Falcons on Sunday night. Now, when it comes down to the Washington Commanders, I'm going to be honest, the Commanders are really going to take the Falcons to town on Sunday night. And this is what they need. Right now, the Eagles are 12-3. You know what that would mean? If the Commanders win their remaining 2 games, they'd be 12-5. They would need the Eagles to drop both their remaining games in order to actually fully clinch an NFC East title. I don't think that'll happen, but still, it is a possibility that the Commanders win their remaining 2 games. Now, when it comes down to it, I'm going to be honest, the Washington Commanders are pretty good. They're going to be in the playoffs. I guarantee you that. But I'm going to be honest, they're not going to get past the second round. They're definitely going to pass the first round. But in the second round, they're going to be eliminated. Now, moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 8. They're in the playoffs. They just took an L from the Baltimore Ravens and will take on the Chiefs on Christmas Day. Now, the 10-5 Steelers, obviously already in the playoffs, they need this win and they need the Ravens to lose to then have a lead in their division. And obviously, they need to win. Honestly, if Pittsburgh wins the remaining 2 games, I think that they can actually clinch the division. But it also comes down to, honestly, who had the better games against certain teams, that kind of stuff. That's going to happen if they both win. Tiebreaker, I think the Steelers take it. But honestly, the Ravens might actually have an opportunity to take it by tiebreaker. I'm not very certain about that. But if one of them loses 1 game and the other wins out, that's it. That team wins the division. And honestly, that's most likely what's going to happen. One of them is going to lose 1 game while the other 2 sweeps the other 2. And I think that might be the Ravens, that they might win the 2 games. And then we see the Steelers at least lose to the Chiefs, but in the end, they're both in playoffs regardless. Now, moving on to the Baltimore Ravens at number 7, 10-5. They took a win from the Steelers and will take on the Texans on Christmas Day. Now, when it comes down to the Baltimore Ravens, they're also in the playoffs, mostly the same as Pittsburgh. It really all comes down to who can win the most games in the last 2 remaining games. Like I said, one team wins 1 game and the other wins the remaining 2. That's all she wrote for that team, and the other makes the playoffs. Obviously they're both in, but I meant like the division. But yeah, in the end, it all really comes down to that, and I think that it it really is a toss up, but I think that Baltimore might actually squeak it out because of the Chiefs game against the Steelers. Honestly, Chiefs didn't do too good against the Raiders on Christmas Day last year, so maybe they'll have the same type of game this year against the Steelers. You never know. But in the end, it really all comes down to these final 2 games with these 2 teams. One loses 1 game and the other wins out, it's over. Now on to number 6 is the potential NFC North champions, the Minnesota Vikings at 13-2, and they took down my Seattle Seahawks handily while they'll take on the Green Bay Packers this upcoming Sunday. Now when it comes down to it, the Minnesota Vikings did an incredible job. They kept it honestly, Seattle was basically I think they only got 1 lead. And then, boom, field goal or touchdown, whatever it was. I don't really remember. But one of the 2 happened, and immediately they got back into this game. And then we all know what happens. Though they are still behind the Detroit Lions, they are actually at the same record of 13-2. So they really need to work hard if they actually want to make it in. Because if they win out and the Lions lose at least 1 game, then it's over and Minnesota is the division champion. And that's what all Vikings fans are hoping for right now. Now, kicking off the top 5, we got the Green Bay Packers at 11-4. They took a massive win last night on Monday Night Football to the New Orleans Saints, 34-0, and will take on the Vikings this upcoming Sunday. Now, obviously, they're all in the playoffs. Vikings, Packers, and, well, I would say Bears, but they're not the ones. It's the Lions. But only the Lions and the Vikings have a chance at the division. Green Bay's in regardless. So at this point, they're just winning to try and get a top spot in the wild card and face the worst team in obviously would be the NFC South champions, whoever it may be, Bucks or Falcons. In the end, it all comes down to how, honestly, Green Bay can do. And honestly, I think that they'll be winning against Minnesota. I think Minnesota's time has come. And most likely, if they lose, the Lions would probably win. And then that's it. Division's theirs. But it all really comes down to how these 2 teams perform this week, because I think this week we'll have an NFC North champion. Now, moving on to the 4th team, which is the Philadelphia Eagles. And they're also in the playoffs. And they are facing off against the Cowboys after taking an L to the Commanders. They're 12-3. Obviously, if they lose the remaining games and the Commanders win the remaining games, that gives Washington the division. And honestly, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that we are going to be seeing an NFC East champion this week, and it most likely will be the Philadelphia Eagles, as I believe that they'll win 1 game, and that game being against the Cowboys, and then they'll probably rest their players for the remaining game. So they probably won't play, and due to injury as well, because Jalen Hurts left the game this Sunday with I believe it was a head injury or some concussion or something. And then you get rib injuries from your backup quarterback, which is Kenny Pickett. And then you'd get Tanner McKee into the game potentially, almost. But yeah, in the end, the Eagles are going to have a QB problem, or they're going to have another Nick Foles this playoff run. And honestly, I think all Eagles fans are hoping Tanner McKee or Kenny Pickett are the next Nick Foles. Now, moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs at 14-1. They just got a win over the Houston Texans and will take on the Steelers on Christmas Day. Now, when it comes down to it, I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are indeed not the number one team. Even though they got the best record, their record does not say their real potential. And I honestly believe that they're just getting lucky at this point. I don't know. And I don't think they're going to get lucky against Pittsburgh. But in the end, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas Day is going to be a very fun game to watch. Although, well, hopefully for many fans around the NFL, a certain team loses on Christmas Day. Now at number 2, we got the Detroit Lions, who are also in the playoffs. They are 13-2. They will take on the 49ers, and last week they just beat the Chicago Bears. Now, when it comes to the Detroit Lions, Monday Night Football between them and the 49ers, they're going to most likely win that game. And honestly, it might be the Lions winning the NFC North this week, depending on what happens between Green Bay and Minnesota. If Green Bay wins and Detroit wins against San Francisco, it's over. Detroit wins the division. But it might also go the other way around. You might see Detroit lose and Minnesota win. But that doesn't mean that they're out just yet. I think that, honestly, the last 2 games are going to be crucial for almost every team in the NFL that are either getting into the playoffs or winning their division, whatever it may be. And these 2 teams, the Lions and the Vikings, are no different. Now on to the number 1 team in the National Football League in my power rankings. We got the Buffalo Bills, 12-3. They beat the New England Patriots and will take on the New York Jets this upcoming week. Now, when it comes to obviously the Buffalo Bills are in the playoffs. They're the AFC East champions. They are really only fighting for that number 1 seed, which is now further away, obviously, as the Chiefs are 14-2. The Bills are 12-3. Obviously, they're 2 games behind. And if Kansas City gets their 1 more win, it's over. They get the number 1 seed, and Buffalo probably ends up at the 2 seed. But still, whether they get the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed, we're probably going to be seeing a Bills-Chiefs AFC Championship game. Now, that was it for this video. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you think should be higher and who do you think should be lower? Tell me down in the comments below and tweet me any video ideas. Now, like this video if you liked it, subscribe, and hit the notification if you want more videos. And I'll see you guys next time.